So, 2017 has come and gone, and like every year, there were good movies, bad movies, great movies, terrible movies. I actually saw more movies last year than I ever have before in a single year because my goal was to explore new avenues and to take any opportunity to watch something that I may have ignored in the past. In the spirit of that achievement, I guess, with the year now over, I wanted to look back at my favorite movies from 2017. Because while it's fun to be critical and complain and pick apart bad movies, the great movies are the ones that really stick with you, that inspire you, that move you, and, of course, entertain you. At the end of every year, looking back at my favorite movies is a fun tradition because I love them all for so many different reasons. Today, I'm going to break down those reasons and talk about my favorite movies of 2017. No rankings, no particular order, just the movies that I loved the most from this past year. So, let's jump right in. John Wick Chapter 2 is everything I wanted it to be and more. As an action movie sequel, it does exactly what it should do, which is escalate the scale, but not at the cost of the story. The plot retains the same simple, single-minded focus that the first film had, alongside a universe that's so fascinating to explore. The film has a self-awareness that's balanced very intelligently. It can certainly be over the top, but it never goes over the line and becomes stupid. And at the center of it all, you've got Keanu Reeves being so great by doing so little. His style of acting is perfectly suited to this character. The action sequences are so fluid, so creative, and to a certain extent artistic in their execution, and the dynamic characters that populate the world help give the film a real energy. I really do think that this series is setting a new standard for action movies, and I can't wait to see how this trilogy is closed out. Logan shows what the superhero genre is capable of when you strip everything away from the characters and throw them into a different world than we've ever seen. There's so much depth and pain and humanity to be found within these characters, but the familiarity is what really sells this story. This film works because of the history of this franchise, especially the history of Wolverine. The exploration of that character, his flaws, the nature of mortality, and the idea of legacy are explored in such fascinating and inventive ways. The brutal violence never feels gratuitous, and the film needed that edge to give this story its impact. It needed that contrast with the rest of the series to feel distinct. But even after such a long journey through such a bleak landscape, the film still ends on a note of hope. This is the best of the X-Men movies by far, and the perfect goodbye to a character who's been a staple of film for as long as I can remember. T2 Trainspotting is far better than I expected because I feared the worst. Its greatest strength is that it recaptures the frenetic energy of the first film, so there's this constant sense of motion to the story. It's great to see these actors back together in these roles, and the time that's passed really works in the story's favor. These characters have aged but not necessarily matured, and they still feel very true to who they were. The adventure that they go on across this film is appropriately loose and directionless and unpredictable as a result. The most interesting and satisfying aspect of the story is its usage of nostalgia, which is woven in some very clever and unintrusive ways. The past is a major theme, but not just because it would make fans happy, but because revisiting the past is what the characters naturally do through the story. This film doesn't go quite as dark as the first one, and it doesn't pack quite the same emotional punch, but as a reunion, it's much more than satisfying. Okhta is one of the weirder movies of the year, but it revels in its weirdness. The film is constantly bizarre, from the story, to the characters, to the world, but it's the sort of bizarre consistency that becomes compelling. The tone bounces all over the place, from goofy, high-octane chase sequences to brutal, intensely emotional standoffs. But these tonal shifts don't feel dissonant, they're masterfully woven together, and the contrast between them helps to reinforce the off-kilter nature of the story. I mean, the emotional core of the film is the connection between a young girl and an enormous CGI pig, which isn't exactly an easy concept to buy into, but you really feel the love between them. If you can get the movie's vibe, you'll love it, and the serious moments still hit hard. If you're a fan of outright weird filmmaking, or you want to see Jake Gyllenhaal give the strangest performance of his career, this film will deliver. Dunkirk is exactly what I expected from a Christopher Nolan war movie in terms of scale and storytelling, and remarkably surprising in terms of emotional impact. What the film absolutely nails is the feeling of claustrophobia. It even manages to make an enormous open beach feel enclosed. The film builds on that sense of dread in the sky, on the water, and on land, and every storyline is equally engaging. It's interesting that these characters are so easy to connect with even though we know so little about them. Most of them don't even get names, but who they are can be so clear. The one aspect of the story I'm a bit mixed on is the way that it unfolds across 3 different timelines. On one hand, it makes this film distinct in the war movie genre, and on the other hand, it can be a bit jarring. However, when all the stories converge, you realize just how cohesive the overall story is, and how well everything fits together, and the film ends on a resounding feeling of victory. SpiderMan Homecoming is far better than it has any right to be. Even though it's the 3rd live-action incarnation of this character in the last decade, this film infuses the idea and character of Spider-Man with a very fresh energy. It's mainly because this story puts Peter Parker at the forefront. It's interesting to see the conflict revolve around who he could be rather than who he is. In forging a new path, a lot of the staples from the comics are ignored, but that allows the filmmakers to tell a far more unpredictable, refreshing story. Stylistically, this film does slot right in with the other Marvel Cinematic Universe films, but it feels like a true standalone adventure. The stakes are low, the characters are strong, the humor is fantastic, and for as many references and Easter eggs as there are, it feels like its own thing. Really, this is the Spider-Man movie I've always wanted to see, and it points to a very bright future for this character in the MCU. The Big Sick is just lovely. As an autobiographical story and a romantic comedy, I would say that it's a quintessential example of how to do both right. As a big fan of Kumail Nanjiani, it's really interesting to see a slice of his life on the big screen, and he gives a fantastic performance and has far more dramatic chops than I expected. The story is pretty straightforward, but it doesn't require a lot of twists and turns to be impactful. That simplicity, that comfort of the story makes it all the more heartwarming. There's even a subplot about struggling at stand-up comedy that isn't totally self-serving and cringeworthy. There's also a very unique cultural perspective to the story. You don't often see Pakistan represented in mainstream films. That adds a real degree of freshness, so the film is anything but 2 bland people falling in love. Really, this movie has everything. It's comedically strong, emotionally resonant, and it's a movie that just about anyone can enjoy. Logan Lucky is a heist film unlike any other I've seen before. In tone, in setting, and in structure, it's very unique. It takes the audience on the same journey as the characters in some very interesting ways by leaving important details hidden to both. This film knows how to play with the conventions of a heist film because it has the essentials of the structure mastered and knows how to subvert expectations. Whenever the film drags, it only does so to make its final twist more impactful. The cast are a joy to watch because everyone is playing against type, but they all fit their bizarre roles so well. It's interesting to see the protagonists be these seemingly dumb rednecks and then have the story subvert that idea at every turn. The point of the film is not to underestimate anyone or anything, and that idea is executed masterfully. This film is a wacky, hilarious, idiosyncratic adventure, and I really hope Steven Soderbergh wants to make more movies because he's as talented as ever. Blade Runner 2049 was the most surprising movie of the year because I have no attachment to the original Blade Runner film, but this movie sucked me into this grimy, dusty, futuristic landscape so quickly and delivered the kind of high-concept, engrossing, imaginative science fiction adventure that I love to experience. This is the best-looking film of the year by far, and visual effects are used to do things I've truly never seen before. The film takes the most intriguing aspects of the Blade Runner universe and tackles them from completely different angles, giving us a story that's anything but a retread, and it ends on one of the most resonating, emotional gut punches of the year. I feel like what I got out of this film was what people got out of the original on an emotional and an artistic level. This film is a remarkable achievement, and it's further cemented Denis Villeneuve as my favorite director working right now. Brigsby Bear is a film that's easy to connect with if you have a particular nostalgic love for a TV show or movie. This film is about how deep that love can run and how much it can impact our lives. The basis for these ideas is pushed to some comedic extremes, but the ridiculous setup for the story complements the simplistic theme very well. There's also a theme of togetherness, of connections, and how the silliest things can bring people together. Kyle Mooney is fantastic in the lead. He strikes this unique balance between detached and focused that's so compelling to watch. You can never really predict where his jokes are headed. What this film really captures is the feeling of making something special with your friends, something that feels important. I really connected with how that was portrayed, so if you're a huge fan of something or just love making things, this film gets what that means and how it feels. Ingrid Goes West is the rare commentary on technology that actually has something to say. It's almost Black Mirror-esque in its execution because it's just believable enough to be off-putting. It's very much a dark comedy. It starts dark and it stays dark, leading down an increasingly twisted path until the end. But it keeps a balance in the insanity. It never feels ridiculous, and the actions of the characters are grounded enough that the story remains believable. Aubrey Plaza does a phenomenal job of playing this unstable, sycophantic maniac obsessed with the artificiality that the internet gives people's lives. The way that artificiality is portrayed, starting off innocent and light and ending sinister and uncomfortable, is really interesting to watch develop. Somehow, this film makes the sound of people reading hashtags chilling. This is very much a movie of this time. I don't know how it will hold up in the future, but it's a fantastic product of our current social media world. Stronger very easily could have been a generic, uplifting biopic, but it took a much more intimate, focused approach. The emotional payoff doesn't come from everyone rallying together in the face of tragedy. That's actually the main source of conflict. It's the focus on Jeff Bowman, played brilliantly by Jake Gyllenhaal, and the personal obstacles he has to overcome, which are represented as plainly and undramatically as possible. You feel the pain he's going through, you feel the difficulty he feels adjusting to a life without legs, and crucially, you understand how he doesn't want to be a hero. Jeff is continually being pushed to be a symbol of hope and perseverance, but his frustration and fear show that all he really wants to be is himself. Thanks to a couple of phenomenal lead performances and expert direction, this film delivers a heartbreaking, powerful story about overcoming the adversity within yourself rather than the adversity of the world around you. So, those are my favorite movies from 2017, and these films aside, I actually found 2017 to be mostly a disappointing year. So many movies that I got really excited for let me down, and I just felt meh towards so much. But that makes me more hopeful for 2018, more curious about what's coming, and I think it's important with film to look forward because my taste is always evolving, and movies that come out in the future will only challenge and change that taste. Well, that's all I really have to say about movies, so now all that's left to say is thank you. This was a huge year for me in terms of YouTube. I mean, my channel exploded in the summer so unexpectedly, and seeing so many people enjoy my content, enjoy the things that I make purely for fun, it's an amazing feeling. And with every new person who watches or subscribes or leaves a comment, positive or negative, I want to create more. I want to try new things and push myself to make better stuff. So, from the bottom of my heart, just an enormous thank you to everyone for watching. Whether you're watching for the Riverdale videos, or the miscellaneous videos, or just to see what I make next, the fact that you take time out of your day to listen to what I have to say about a movie or a TV show, it's incredibly meaningful. So thank you once again, and I hope you have a great year.